Okay. Welcome. Welcome back. Today, we are going to watch some more statistics. And I'm going to be pretty quiet just starting out because I am just starting to drink my coffee here. I should get more riveted as these videos move forward, and we're gonna try and get super smart today. Okay. So actually, the first thing I'm gonna do, you get to look at the world while I figure some stuff out. Just gonna crack open some of my old notes. Okay. All right. Thank you for bearing with me. Got our handy dandy notepad. Today, we're doing crash course statistics number 9. Number 9. I always thought that was one of the most annoying Beatles song moments. Was it the most annoying though? They had a lot of annoying songs. A lot of funny songs, a lot of good songs. But they were having a good time, huh? Okay, controlled experiments. So I'm just gonna plop this on for you people while I get a little more caffeinated. And we're gonna try and think through it, get a little smarter, put our thinking caps on. And I'm not really sure what direction I'm gonna go from here. Probably just gonna try to crush through some of these videos. Probably try to find a few more, decent entry level videos. Take some more notes, and we'll see where we go from there. All right, press and play.
Adrian Hill, and welcome back to Crash Course Statistics. Famous tech guy and likely future space dweller Elon Musk once told interviewers that there's a high probability that we're all living in a simulation. Now that might sound outlandish, and it's an interesting statement about probability, but today we're going to focus on the simulation part. Elon Musk, as well as some philosophers, futurists, and technologists, argue that it's entirely possible, probable in fact, that in a few thousand years we will be able to create simulations like World of Warcraft or Minecraft that are so real they'll be indistinguishable from real life. Living in a world like that, there's no way for you to tell if you're living in the true world or a simulation, or maybe a simulation inside a simulation. If we were living in Musk's vision of a future world, anytime we wanted to test something, like whether that bus would have splashed us if we didn't stop to answer a text, or whether the new drug we invented can cure lung cancer, all we would need to do is run 2 identical simulations. In one simulation, we'd give people with lung cancer the new drug and watch to see what happens, taking notes on things like lung capacity and remission rates. While that's happening, we'd do exactly the same thing in another simulation, except we give patients a placebo drug, something that looks and feels like a real drug, but isn't, and we'd record our results. Once both simulations are done, we'd be able to look at our data and have a good idea of whether it works. Now, we can't yet run a parallel universe just to satisfy our curiosity about whether the amount of time we spend sleeping next to our cell phone increases our chance of brain cancer, but we are doing the next best thing. Researchers have started using simulations to study cancer treatments, to predict the impacts of climate change. Researchers are using VR to simulate disaster situations and to help train people how to respond in earthquakes or floods. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Still, we need other ways to answer the burning questions that keep us up at night. And until scientists can pull through with the necessary technology, we're limited to 2 main methods of collecting data to answer our questions. One way to get around our inability to create and destroy universes at will is by using experiments. Experiments try to mimic parallel universes by taking the one universe we do have and splitting it randomly into groups. Imagine a high school where test scores are low, and we want to see whether buying cappuccino machines for students' families will improve test scores. We don't have 2 parallel versions of the high school to test our idea, but we can randomly split it into 2 groups. One group's families will get the free cappuccino machines, and the others won't. And then we let life go on, just like in the simulations, and we record the test scores of both groups. Because we randomly assigned each person's group, every single family had an equal chance of being in the cappuccino or in the no cappuccino groups. Randomness allows us to claim that before the cappuccino makers were given out, there were no systematic differences between the groups. Usually, researchers will use a random number generator to assign subjects in.
Okay, I think that's an important note. So, okay, these are a lot of this stuff is stuff that I kind of know, but I've never really thought about that explicitly before. Because obviously I kind of know everything, okay? But I kind of know some of this stuff. It's kind of good to think about it, though, and get it a little internalized. I want to think with the mind of a statistician. I want to be able to create these things for myself, to create new worlds, to boldly go where no statistician has gone before. But just so that you know, just as a remembering why we're doing this in the first place, and I don't know that I've even ever said it. Probably have in a previous video, but I want to say it again. The purpose of this channel is to, in part, at least one of the purposes of this channel is to work on how we know things. And statistics is a way that we know things. It is used by every major scientific discipline, and insofar as you think science produces real knowledge, then statistics is one of the methods or the disciplines by which these scientific disciplines produce this knowledge. Now, I'd like to go through at some point and do more work to try and talk about the justifications for science. But to be honest with you, I'm a layman, right? I don't know a lot of this stuff. I like to listen about this stuff. I like to approach it. But I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm certainly not an expert. So a lot of this, if you're joining me on this journey, a lot of this is it's me trying to learn more, and it's very much as a layman and not as an expert. I haven't really talked a lot about myself yet on this channel. I mean, the long and the short of it is, I have my degree in geography. I got that 10 years ago, and it was a great course, but we'll just say that when I was in college, knowledge or learning wasn't really my focal point. It was more learning about myself. And no, that doesn't mean partying, but it does mean not really paying attention in class. And I had fun. I had a lot of good times with friends. But as life went on, uh, had to deal with some stuff with myself. You know, I was in a relationship, and then out of a relationship, and then I was working really hard to try and make a project, to make a maker space happen, and then that kind of fell through, and I met a girl, and long of the story is, and I hope this isn't too much of an overshare, but she really broke me emotionally, and I don't blame her, but it did force me. I like to think of it as, she broke me open, you know, and it really forced me to have to deal with some stuff emotionally, and it's been a process, right? But part of that process is learning how to know things. How do we know things? How do we what do we trust? You know, how do we trust? You might say, like, intuitively, you might think, okay, going from relational stuff, like, knowing things in a relationship, you may be even inferring something like, did she cheat on you or something like that? It's a little complicated, but long and the short of it is, the connection to statistics is more about like you're not really gonna use statistics in your relationships, but there is something to be said about how we know things, and statistics being an important statistics being an important way that we learn how to know things. So you have statistics, you have philosophy, which really gets you in your head. And then you have like other ways of knowing, things that are more like embodied and physiological, and involve touching grass. And those are important ways too. And I think a well rounded human being has to sort of engage in all of these kinds of ways of knowing, and then you put them all together and you become a better person. That's as simple as I can say it at the moment. I'm working at becoming a better communicator, working at getting better at speaking my thoughts and not using and ums and all that. So statistics is a part of that. Statistics is a part of that, and I'm hoping to leverage this into something else. Not sure what yet, but I appreciate you being with me on this journey. We may explore some of those others, you may have picked up by some of the videos on my channel that I have some influences with Vervaeke. And whenever I start getting super into somebody's work, I like to also be able to challenge that work. It's just sort of an anti-cult measure. So developing a solid critique, I think, will require me also to know statistics. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. I hope you're with me for this journey, to enjoy the process of learning statistics. I have a plan to maybe release some more videos. I haven't written them yet. I might write them on stream. I don't know. Might even consult the chat GPT to help me with that. But yeah, as it stands, working at becoming a more clear, concise communicator, all those ways of knowings. We'll probably look at some of Vervaeke's work. I like to track down some people and talk to them about philosophy, statistics, all that. And yeah, if you enjoy this content, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go to my Patreon. You go to your search bar and you type in my Patreon, which is patreon.com/mind of meaning, and you press the enter button, and you will arrive at a page where you can pay $5 a month to hear me ramble in your ear, and we can listen to statistics, and I can be your best friend. Yeah, so go do that. I recommend it, highly recommend it. It's 9 out of 10 statistics think that if you don't do that, you're a horrible person. 9 out of 10 statisticians. So do that, and then come back after you've done that, and let me know that you've done that. And yeah, that's it. We are gonna get back into it. Right now.
Into random groups. Random assignment reduces the chance that the bias of the people running the experiment will affect the groups. For example, it prevents them from doing things like putting subjects who they think will respond to caffeine in the cappuccino group and those who don't in the no cappuccino group. It also makes it impossible for people to choose their own groups. That way, the coffee lovers don't all sign up for the free cappuccino machine while the tea enthusiasts don't. These two problems are called allocation bias and selection bias, respectively. Because of randomness, it's unlikely, though not impossible, that all the wealthy people ended up in one group and the not so wealthy in the other, or the vegans in one group and the omnivores in the other. Randomness is usually our best method for ensuring that our groups are similar before we give them any treatment. But the slight possibility that our groups might be really uneven is why it's important to replicate experiments. In some situations, researchers can also force the number of wealthy people, or the number of vegans, to be the same in each group. This is something called randomized block design. But randomness usually does a pretty good job. In our example, a treatment was either getting a cappuccino machine or not getting a cappuccino machine. In general, treatments are conditions that we want to test, like new medicines or educational interventions, like reading extra books to your kids. Treatments can also have levels. For example, when we look at whether exercise is related to weight loss, we might have 3 groups. One group does no exercise, one group does 5 hours of exercise a week.
Give me 1 second. I want to try something. Whoa. Whoa. Thank you for bearing with me.
Does 10 hours of exercise a week. These levels can help us see whether there's a linear relationship between our treatment and our outcome, or whether 5 hours of exercise is just as good as 10. One of the treatments in an experiment is usually nothing. These treatments are called controls, and they play a huge role in experiments. It's our way of pretending that we have a universe where there's no treatment. Let's say you got a little too eager to get your freshly baked chocolate chip cookies out of the oven and you didn't put the mitt on right and you burned your finger. You put some Neosporin on it, and after a few days, your finger heals. You're so happy that you practically turn into Neosporin's next spokesperson. But it's possible that the burn would have healed just fine on its own. A control treatment, aka no treatment, would let us compare what happens between two similar burns, one treated with an antibiotic cream and one left to heal by itself. These types of control groups are great at helping us divide up the changes we observe
I'll
into
be
changes
right back.
due to treatments
Just going
and changes that are
to
just due to time or circumstance.
get some
If your
more
finger
coffee.
heals faster with
Keep
ointment
watching.
than without it, we can more confidently claim that there's a relationship between Neosporin use and burn healing than if we didn't have a control. Sometimes we want to control for more than just time and circumstance with our control treatments. With medical trials, you as the person taking the medicine would want new medicines to work better than nothing, but you also want to make sure that it's not just the act of doing something that's making you feel better. It's been shown that just the act of taking a fake medication or having a fake surgery, seriously, can make people feel better. These are called placebo effects. Placebos allow us to control these effects by pretending to treat everyone. Subjects in medical studies are often given sugar pills or saline drips to make it seem like both groups are being treated. Non-medical studies also use placebos. Studies that claim first-person shooter video games like Call of Duty improve cognition should probably
Okay, so yeah, basic thing. A control group is designed to help us. A control group is designed to help us determine whether the effects of a thing have the effect we think they're having, and how much of that can be attributed to just us thinking that the thing that we are studying that is having the effect is having the effect. How's that for concise? Not very. Not very. All right, let's keep plowing through.
have a control group that plays a non-first-person shooter, like Mario Kart. Then the researchers can ensure that it's not just the act of participating in research or learning a new video game console that's causing the observed changes. Essentially, good placebos and controls should look and feel as close as possible to the actual treatment, so that the only difference is whatever we're actually interested in, like first-person shooter video games. Sometimes there are undetected factors causing changes in an experiment that we just don't know about. Well-chosen placebos and controls allow us to better account for them. Sometimes it's just not possible to shield subjects from knowing the difference between conditions. Take diets, for example. When people agree to be put into a clinical study which compares a group of subjects who do not change their diet to a group that goes low carb, it's hard to make both groups think they're doing the same treatment. People can see what they're eating. When subjects don't know which treatment they're receiving, usually because they're getting a good placebo, they're considered blind to the treatment. An experiment where subjects don't know what treatment they're getting, but the researchers do, is called a single-blind study, which leads to better experiments because all groups experience the act of being treated. But even in a single-blind study, it's possible that researchers might be biased when observing the subjects. The researchers still know which treatment the subject is getting. A researcher who spent years creating, funding, and planning a study probably thinks their treatment works. I mean, why would you dedicate your life to developing a drug to cure cancer if you don't think it works? The problem is that belief in the value of the treatment can cause researchers to subconsciously project those beliefs onto their subjects. In the 1990s, a group of researchers looked at almost 24 studies about whether sugar causes hyperactivity in children, and they concluded that, in general, it doesn't. Parents who thought their children were given sugar reported them as being hyperactive, but it turned out they were probably just being kids. When parents are blinded to whether their children receive sugar, both groups of parents reported roughly equal levels of hyperactivity. Even when we think our subconscious biases don't get in the way, they still sometimes do. We try to solve this problem by having double-blind studies in which both the subjects and the researchers have no idea which treatment the subject is getting. Just like with blinding patients, sometimes it's impossible for the researcher to not be able to tell the difference, but double-blind studies are the gold standard in many fields whenever they're physically and financially doable. And while we still can't bend space and time to make parallel universes, there are a few other ways to pretend we do have them. One is matched pairs experiments. Just like the name implies, these experiments use pairs of subjects that are very similar and give one of them treatment A and the other treatment B. Identical twins, for example, are about as close as we can get to a parallel universe. Since twins are genetically similar and often grow up in the same situation, we're able to get our treatment groups to be almost exactly the same, or at least way closer than random assignment alone. The more similar the groups are before treatment, the better researchers can spot treatment effects. We can also have a matched pairs experiment with non-twins. In this case, each pair is matched on one or more features that the researchers decide are important, like age, race, gender, or weight. Then these pairs are treated like twins. One is assigned treatment A, and the other treatment B. For simplicity here, we're assuming there are two groups. There could be more, but the best subject researchers can pair you with is yourself. Many experiments will give the same subject multiple treatments, one at a time, to see how they react to each. This ensures that each treatment group is the same, since it's all the same people. This type of matched pairs design is often called a repeated measures design. And while it comes with its own set of limitations, it can be better than regular random assignment. And sometimes the stars align and we get to see the results of the interesting experiments that we don't have the power to implement ourselves. Recently, the city of Philadelphia passed a sugar...
Oh, I just remembered something else I want to do on this channel. I'd like to get some people on to do street epistemology. Now, obviously, we're not in the street. We might be of the street, but we're not in the street because we're online. Yeah, so I want to find some people who want to do some street epistemology. If you don't know what street epistemology is, it's basically the process of, in a very friendly way, getting someone to challenge their own beliefs. Now, we love that here. We love that here, and I'll tell you why. We love to challenge our beliefs because what we believe is likely wrong to some degree. And we like the truth here. The truth is good. The truth will set you free. But what are our standards for truth? How do you like this voice I'm putting on? How do we determine what our truth is? I wanna get that Vsauce voice. You know, we're gonna watch some Vsauce. I like Vsauce. His stuff is well, it's not him. I think it's Michael is the main guy. It's just weird. I like it. Tangents, I know. So, street epistemology. It's the process of getting someone to change their beliefs. So we're gonna try and work on that. See if we can develop some skills in epistemologizing streetily, or streetalizing epistemologically, or just street epistemologizing methodically. I don't know. Anyway, let's keep plowing through it here.
Tax that would charge companies an extra 1.5 cents per ounce of sugary beverage sold. Researchers can't just assign cities to have extra taxes. When cities do vote these things into law, some very interesting things can happen. And they did in the Philadelphia International Airport. Because the airport straddles the city's border, some of those otherwise identical stores had to comply with the law, while others didn't. Through this data, researchers were able to find that, contrary to previous assurances, chain stores in tax terminals raised their prices about 0.83 cents per ounce more than their non-tax terminal counterparts, which means the tax did what it was supposed to do: increase the cost of sugary drinks and encourage people to buy less. We all consume products that are the result of experimentation, from Amazon's web design to the prescription drugs we take, which is why it's useful to know why researchers feel like they can make the decisions and claims that they do. Knowing the theory behind experimentation also allows us to be more informed consumers. So the next time you find yourself staring down the homeopathic medicine section, wondering if that effervescent tab developed by an instructor of students will really stop your cold, ask how they tested it. Ask who tested it. DFTBAQ. You know, I'm not sure why this isn't taking off. I mean, where's my t-shirt? Anybody? Crash Course Statistics is filmed in the Chad and Stacy Imigholt studio.
All right, pretty basic. Let's move to the next one.
And it's made with the help of all... Hi, I'm Adrienne Hill. Welcome back to Crash Course Statistics. In our last episode, we talked about how we use experiments to imitate having two parallel universes to test things. But sometimes you can't do certain experiments without becoming an all-powerful and evil dictator. And since it's statistically unlikely that any of you are evil dictators, today we'll explore those methods. Like we mentioned at the beginning of the series, you're not always able to answer the questions you really want to answer using statistics. For example, it would be great to experimentally test whether getting married increases your lifespan, but you can't randomly assign some people to be married and force another group to be single. Not only would that be difficult to enforce, it would also be pretty unethical, though I suppose you being evil takes care of that particular concern. Similarly, we can't assign someone to be a twin, or a Democrat, or a smoker.
I think there's a case to be made that not doing it is unethical. So who's evil now?
But that doesn't mean we should just give up and stop trying to find out more about all these topics. Not at all. Instead, we just need a different method to collect data. Enter non-experimental methods. One of the most common non-experimental methods is the survey. From user experience surveys on websites to political polls to health questionnaires at the doctor's office, you've probably taken hundreds of these surveys in your lifetime. There are two things that can make or break a survey: the questions and who the researcher gives the questions to. The goal of a survey is to get specific information. Say you're walking your dog in a local park and someone approaches you and asks you to take a survey on local businesses in your town. When you look at the questions, you notice none of them are about local businesses. Instead, you find yourself answering questions about your politics and religious beliefs. Unless the surveyor was lying to you about their purposes, this is not a very good survey. It's also not a very good lie. A survey should measure what it claims to measure. It might seem obvious that having only unrelated questions on your survey is problematic, but there are even more subtle ways a question can be biased. Let's take a look at a few questions from a health survey you might find at the doctor's office. The first question asks you how often you exercise. Never, less than 30 minutes a week, or 30 minutes a day. But what do you answer if you exercise for half an hour twice a week, or if you're on a swim team and exercise for at least an hour a day? And does dog walking count as exercise? Multiple choice questions that don't offer all possible options and or an other option can cause respondents to either skip the question or feel forced to choose an answer that isn't accurate. Claims made using these questions aren't as strong as they could be if people were offered a full range of choices. The next question at your doctor's office asks you, answer yes or no. I don't smoke because I know it's damaging to my health. This is a leading question since the wording leads towards the, quote, desired answer. This is especially effective when a question deals with sensitive issues like smoking, politics, or religion. People answering the questions want to be seen in a positive light, and so they tend to give the answer they think is appropriate. While having people fill surveys out anonymously by themselves can help, it can sometimes be the case that respondents don't want to admit things, even to themselves, that are socially undesirable. In general terms, good survey questions are worded in a neutral way, such as asking, how often do you exercise? Or describe your smoking habits, instead of using wording or options that push survey takers in a certain direction. And while your doctor wouldn't or shouldn't do this, sometimes groups purposely use biased questions in their surveys to get the results they want. Apparently, back in 1972, Virginia Slims conducted a poll asking respondents if they would agree with the following statement. Quote, there won't be a woman president of the United States for a long time, and that's probably just as well. Not a well-written question. Bias questions can be more subtle and can lead to very skewed reports of very serious things like sexual assault or mental health conditions. It's important to always look for biased questions in surveys, especially when the people giving the survey stand to benefit from a certain response. Even when researchers have created a...
That seems to be an important statement.
It's important to always look for biased questions in surveys, especially when the people giving the survey stand to benefit from a certain response. Even when researchers have created a non-biased survey, they still need to get it into the right hands. Ideally, a survey should go to a random sample of the population that they're interested in. Usually, this means using a random number generator to pick who gets the survey. We do simple random sampling, so there's no pattern or system for selecting respondents, and each respondent has an equal chance of being selected. automated. For example, telephone surveys often use random digit dialing, which selects 7 random digits and dials them. When someone picks up, they're asked to take a survey. But here's where we hit our first issue. If people aren't forced to respond to the survey, we might experience something called non-response bias, in which the people who are most likely to complete a survey are systematically different from those who don't. For example, people with non-traditional working schedules like retirees, stay-at-home parents, or people who work from home might be non-traditional survey. Our
Non-response bias, that's important. Excuse me. The people who respond to a survey, you like my spelling? Survey are systematically different from the people who don't. You know, there's someone I actually want to be able to talk to about this stuff, but I want to get my groove a bit more before I reach out to certain people. So we're gonna stick with the crash course for a little bit, and I gotta think of other projects to do, right? Because like reacting to statistic content is not a great channel gonna make. Like let's be honest. I mean, even though this course here is, you know, written for children, and it's meant to be engaging, it's a little, you know, it's dry content. So you know, even with all the dressings, it's still a little bit of a slog. Now I like slogs, but it's still a little rough. So I'm thinking about how we like some projects we might be able to do. I'm trying to think of like how we can flex our statistical muscles. Maybe we can play with Python and do some like build some dashboards. And I'm trying to think whether I want to do that on screen or whether I want to do that by myself and just show what I work on off screen. I mean, like I say, not particularly engaging content, but I don't know, maybe there's a way it can be done. If any of you people out there have any ideas, please let me know. Please let me know. And if you are, for some reason, enjoying this content, then please support me over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/mindofmeaning. And yeah, pay $5 a month. Pay less than 2 lattes a week. Less than 2 lattes a week for some of the best statistic content that has ever existed. And if it does exist, then we'll cover it, thus enhancing its flavor. That's the truth. Would I lie? I mean, if I would, then I would do so with statistics. So and we'll go over that, you know? That's actually a good idea for a series. How to lie with statistics. And we can cover sophisticated ways of lying with statistics. So not just how to spot lies, but how to actually lie. And then by inhabiting that mindset of someone who wants to lie with statistics, then we can work on maybe better being able to spot it in the wild. So, you know what? Consider this the start of a series that we will revisit again and again. That series is called How to Lie with Statistics. All right, so we've already covered, we've got 2 methods on the table so far. One we learned from, I forget what, hold on, let me check my notes, because I think I wrote it down. I think it was the last one. Binning? It was something to do with binning. Oh wait, that was the Vervaeke stuff. Correlation, causation. I think it was all in all the data visualization stuff. Did I not open it? Hold on, people. Hey, you. Come back. I love you. All right, so which one didn't I open? I didn't open number 2. Okay. Descriptive, central tendency. Box plots, that was 2. Then we had 3. Regression, correlation, coefficient, squared correlation, cause A, descriptive statistics, the mean, convention. Did I not write it down? 1, 2, 3. Oh, I guess not. Well, anyway, yeah, that was the thing about binning. Like, if you have I think it was called binning. We can find out, look back at some point and figure it out. I'm not doing it right now. Just you can't make me. But yeah, that was like, if you don't like the results of some data you've collected, it's like, say you've collected it based on certain decades, like ages, 10 to 20, ages 20 to 30, ages 30 to 40, ages 40 to 50, etc., etc. Then what you can do is you can just switch it up a bit and create different categories of ages, such that it more supports the thing that you actually want. So that's one way you can lie with statistics. So if you're thinking about needing to lie with statistics, then that is a way to do it. A second way here is when we're doing non-experimental methods, such as a survey. What you can do is use very biased questioning. Lead the people you are surveying to the correct result. The result is what you want. What you want to do is backwards rationalize. You want to think for people, because people can't think for themselves. So what you do is you create survey questions that lead people into the right answer. People need to be guided, and we just need to guide them along the path to the correct answers. We do that with bias. Do you like that? You like my evil intention? I wonder what other methods we can use to lie with statistics. That might be a good idea for a YouTube video too. We can make something a little more formalized, right? This could be fun. How to lie with statistics. YouTube video idea. I think this is a good idea. I think we've got some plans. I think my coffee's starting to kick in. And with that note, I'm gonna play more of this video, but I will be right back.
Systematically different from those who don't. For example, people with non-traditional working schedules like retirees, stay-at-home parents, or people who work from home might be more likely to answer a middle-of-the-day phone survey. This is a big problem if those groups are different than the population as a whole. If your survey was on health insurance plans or political opinions, it's likely these three groups would have different opinions than the population, but they represent the majority of survey responses, which means your data won't represent the total population all that well. This is also related to voluntary response bias, in which people who choose to respond to voluntary surveys they see on Facebook or Twitter are people who, again, are different than the broad population. This is especially true with things like customer service surveys. People who respond tend to have either very positive or very negative opinions. I mean, see the comment section below. The majority of customers with an average experience tend not to respond because service wasn't noteworthy. Wait, does that mean I'm not noteworthy? Another source of bias is just plain underrepresentation. If a group of interest is a minority in the population, random sampling paired with response biases might mean that minority isn't represented at all in the sample. Let's say there's a city where 5% of the population is single mothers. It's entirely possible that the sample will contain no single moms. To overcome these issues, we have a couple options. We could weight people's responses so they match the population, like counting the few single mothers who do respond multiple times so they end up counting for 5% of the total sample. But this can be problematic for the same reason that response bias is problematic. If the few single mothers who respond don't represent all single mothers, our data is still biased. In a 2016 LA Times USC political tracking poll, a 19-year-old black man was one of 3,000 panelists who was interviewed week after week about the upcoming presidential election. Because he was a member of more than one group that was underrepresented in this poll, his response was weighted 30 times more than the average respondent. According to the New York Times, his survey boost his candidate's margins by an entire percentage point. Stratified random sampling is another option. It splits the population into groups of interest and randomly selects people from each of the stratas so that each group in the overall sample is represented appropriately. Researchers have used stratified sampling to study differences in the way same-sex and different-sex couples parent their kids. They randomly select people from the same-sex parenting group and randomly select people from the different-sex parenting group to make sure they're well represented in the sample. Another issue is that getting surveys to people can be expensive. If a cereal company wants to see how families react to their new cereal, it would be costly to send some cereal to a random sample of all the families in the country. Instead, they use cluster sampling, which create clusters, not honey nut clusters, that are naturally occurring, like schools or cities, and randomly select a few clusters to survey instead of randomly selecting individuals. For this to work, clusters cannot be systematically different than the population as a whole, and they should about equally represent all groups. Issues can also arise when the population being surveyed is very small or difficult to reach, like children with rare genetic disorders or people addicted to certain drugs. In this case, surveyors may choose not to use randomness at all and instead use snowball sampling. That's when current respondents are asked to help recruit people they know from the population of interest, since people tend to know others in their communities and can help researchers get more responses. And note here that these sampling techniques can and are used in experiments as well as surveys. There are other non-experimental data collection methods, like a census. A census is a survey that samples an entire population. The United States conducts a census every 10 years. The next one is scheduled to be done in 2020. It attempts to collect data from every single resident of the United States, even undocumented residents and homeless residents. As you can imagine, this is hard, and it's not without error. In medieval Europe, William I of England conducted a census in order to properly tax the people he had conquered. In fact, a lot of rulers tend to use censuses to know just how much money they should be demanding. Until the widespread availability of computers, the US Census data took almost 10 years to collect and analyze, meaning that data from the last census wasn't even available until right before the next census. The length of time it took to complete the census is part of the reason we have computers. Check out our Comp Sci series for more on that. So why collect census data instead of just sampling the population? In the US, the census could cost more than $15 billion in 2020. There are a lot of reasons. I mean, the Constitution says we have to, but also the census provides the truest measure of the population we can get. It minimizes sampling error. It also functions as a benchmark for future studies. And a census can give researchers really specific information about small groups of the population, information that might be hard to gather with regular sampling methods. And doing statistics on census data is different because most statistical inference aims to take a small sample and use it to make guesses about the population. But with a census, we already have data from the entire population. We don't need to guess if there are differences. We can just see them. Analysis on census data is usually more concerned with whether differences we see are large enough to make a difference in everyday life, rather than guessing if there is a relationship. The census, as we said, can take years and entire countries to fund. That doesn't discount the value of sampling, but we should be cautious. Badly worded polls, fake polls, and biased polls are common. So are the results of those polls. The statistics-friendly website 538 put together a great list of advice on how not to fall for a fake poll. Among its advice, ask yourself if it seems professional. Check to see who conducted the poll, and if you trust them, see how the poll was conducted. Check out the questions they asked and who they asked. If it seems fishy, it probably is fishy. That said, well-done surveys are essential. They allow us to get information without all the trouble of doing an experiment. And since they're comparatively easy, they're popular ways for businesses, countries, and even YouTube channels to collect information. In fact, Crash Course Statistics has its own survey. The link is in the description. And it takes way less time than the Nerdfighteria one. I promise. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Crash Course Statistics is filmed in the Chad and Stacy Imigholt studio in Indianapolis, Indiana, and it's made with the help of all these nice people. Our animation team is Thought Cafe. If you'd like to keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, you can support the series at Patreon, a crowdfunding platform that allows you to support the
No. I'm just kidding. Feel free to support them if you want. But if you like my content covering their content, then you should definitely support patreon.com/mindofmeaning. That would be the good idea. Now, during my brief respite, during my moment of peace, I was listening to the video in the background, and I have to go back because I want to take some notes. There's a lot of good stuff in this video about sampling, so we're going to go back and basically watch the thing again.
Well-written question. Bias questions can be more subtle and can lead to very skewed reports of very serious things like sexual assault or mental health conditions. Survey stand to benefit from a certain response, even when researchers have using a random number generator to pick who gets the survey. We do simple random sampling, so there's no pattern or system for selecting respondents, and each respondent has an equal chance of being selected. For example, telephone surveys often use random digit dialing, which selects 7 random digits and dials them. When someone picks up, they're asked to take a survey. But here's where we hit our first issue. If people aren't forced to respond to the survey, we might experience something called non-response bias, in which people who work from home might be more likely to answer a middle-of-the-day phone survey. This is a big problem if those groups are different than the population as a whole. If your survey was on health insurance plans or political opinions, it's likely these 3 groups would have different opinions than the population, but they represent the majority of survey responses, which means your data won't represent the total population all that well. This is also related to voluntary response bias, in which people who choose to respond to voluntary surveys they see on Facebook or Twitter are people who, again, are different than the broad population. This is especially true with things like customer service surveys. People who respond tend to have either very positive or very negative opinions. I mean, see the comment section below. The majority of customers with an average experience tend not to respond because service wasn't noteworthy. Wait, does that mean I'm not noteworthy? Another source of bias is just plain underrepresentation. If a group of interest is a minority in the population, random sampling paired with response biases might mean that minority isn't represented at all in the sample. Let's say there's a city where 5% of the population is single mothers. It's entirely possible that the sample will contain no single moms. To overcome these issues, we have a couple options. We could weight people's responses so they match the population, like counting the few single mothers who do respond multiple times so they end up counting for 5%.
Okay, how to overcome weight responses of people unlikely to respond. So if you get some sampling of people who are less likely to respond, the ones that do count for more. That makes sense.
Of the total sample. But this can be problematic for the same reason that response bias is problematic. problematic. If the few single mothers who respond don't represent all single mothers, our data is still biased. In a 2016 LA Times USC political tracking poll, a 19-year-old black man was one of 3,000 panelists who was interviewed week after week about the upcoming presidential election. Because he was a member of more than one group that was underrepresented in this poll, his response was weighted 30 times more than the average respondent. According to the New York Times, his survey boost his candidate's margins by an entire percentage point. Stratified random sampling is another option. It splits the population.
Stratified random sampling. Splits the population into groups of interest and stop it, and randomly selects people from each stratus so that each group in the overall sample is represented appropriately.
Population into groups of interest and randomly selects people from each of the stratas so that each group in the overall sample is represented appropriately. Researchers have used stratified sampling to study differences in the way same-sex and different-sex couples parent their kids. They randomly select people from the same-sex parenting group and randomly select people from the different-sex parenting group to make sure they're well represented in the sample. Another issue is that getting surveys to people can be expensive. If a cereal company wants to see how families react to their new cereal, it would be costly to send some cereal to a random sample of all the families in the country. Instead, they use cluster sampling, which create clusters, not honey nut clusters, that are naturally
Create cluster sampling. Creates clusters that are naturally occurring and randomly selects a few clusters to survey instead of randomly sampling. Selecting individuals.
occurring, like schools or cities, and randomly select a few clusters to survey instead of randomly selecting individuals. For this to work, clusters cannot be systematically different than the population as a whole, and they should about equally represent all groups. Issues can also arise when the population being surveyed is very small or difficult to reach, like children with rare genetic disorders or people addicted to certain drugs. In this case, surveyors may choose not to use randomness at all and instead use snowball sampling.
I don't know
That's
what to
when
do.
current
It's
respondents are asked to help recruit people they know
out
from
of
the
alignment,
population of
but
interest, since
you'll
people
get over
tend
it.
to know others in their communities and can help researchers get more responses. And note here that these sampling techniques can and are used in experiments as well as surveys. There are other non-experimental data collection methods, like a census. A census is a survey that samples an entire population. The United States conducts a census every 10 years. The next one is scheduled to be done in 2020. It attempts to collect data from every single resident of the United States, even undocumented residents and homeless residents. As you can imagine, this is hard, and it's not without error. In medieval Europe, William I of England conducted a census in order to...
Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to grab from this one, so we're gonna skip ahead to the next one.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Hill, and welcome back to Crash Course Statistics. In this series, we've been talking a lot about how often you see data and statistics on the news and on social media. There are all sorts of studies and data sets promising the keys to a better life. Coffee's good for you. No, wait, it's killing you. So what do you trust? Journalism has many goals: to inform, expose, help people make better decisions about their communities and their lives. But the only way journalism matters is if people read it, or watch it, or listen to it. Journalists have to capture the attention of their audience and help them connect with the story. Case studies and observational studies can be a great source of material for an article or a podcast, but it's always important to look at both the quality of the science and the quality of the journalism. If there's a study without a control group or a non-randomized design, it's going to be less reliable. And if a journalist doesn't ask those questions or just doesn't include the answers in her story, how are you going to know? Back in 2015, newspapers around the world ran stories heralding chocolate as a way to lose weight. It sounds great, but turns out it wasn't good journalism or good science. A science journalist and PhD named John Bohannon created this story by doing a real randomized study, but one that was intentionally riddled with flaws. It was meant to be a way to show that academic journals would publish the very flawed study, and so would news outlets. The goal, writes Bohannon, was to demonstrate how easy it is to turn bad science into big headlines. And it worked. Once the study was published and the press release went out, journalists jumped on it. Bohannon says that many outlets ran the story without ever contacting him. Very few reporters asked about the number of subjects they tested, only 16, and no one, he says, reported that number. Also, says Bohannon, the stories that ran didn't quote any outside researchers for corroboration. And while it's disappointing that you can't add some Cadbury to your diet and lose weight, and maybe your aunt keeps quoting this study to you as she downs that 5th and 6th bonbon, but bad science and bad scientific journalism is not always that harmless. Most clinical studies base their conclusions on statistical tests that give researchers and the rest of us a quantifiable way to measure the evidence.
It's kind of funny that a lot of things this lady is saying, she's like explaining it, but it's like it's from a simpler time, you know, when this stuff needed to be explained why it's an issue. And like nowadays, a lot of this seems pretty self-evident, I would say. Like it's pretty clear why statistics is important at this point, I think. So, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that, but I just think it's funny.
Study provides. For example, when a reputable doctor claims that ibuprofen increases the risk of fertility issues in men, it's because there was a study with a group that took ibuprofen and a control group that didn't, and the subjects taking ibuprofen showed a tangible increase in some measure of infertility. But which measure? And was the control group given a placebo? An article that you read on Yahoo Health probably is not going to tell you. For that information, you have to go to the original academic article, and those can be kind of dense. It turns out that this study did have a placebo control group, and it measured infertility in a clinically respectable way by measuring levels of fertility-related hormones.
This right here is what this channel is about. I figured since we were on this section of the video, I would just underscore it. What she's doing, which is pointing to the research journal itself, is exactly what this channel hopes to improve upon. We are advocates for the truth here. We think the truth is a good thing, generally speaking, probably good. And so insofar as, and I said it earlier today, but insofar as science produces real knowledge, insofar as science is really discovering things or creating things, and those things are true, we should probably understand how and why to some level of sophistication. There should be some measure of, consider it similar to literacy levels, right? Like, you can technically survive without literacy, like literal literacy, like reading books. You can probably survive, but it's very hard. And I think we need a similar amount of understanding for scientific understanding, like what science is doing, how it's doing it. Statistics is part of that. And that's why we're doing this deep dive. Now the question is, will anybody ever watch this content? This very important content. Because it's so dry, it's challenging, right? Like, I put it off. When I was in college, Like people would say, "Oh yeah, you should really learn about statistics. You should really learn about statistics." Let me tell you something. This should be required in schools. It should be mandatory. The fact that it's not is, in a lot of ways, why we're in this epistemic problem we're in today, where nobody can get on the same page, and it's ridiculous. Okay? We need to figure this out. And that's what we're doing here, figuring it out. So, thank you for joining me. If you aren't enjoying this content, or even if you are, please consider supporting me at patreon.com/mindofmeaning. I know I say it a lot, but no one's here at the moment, so I'm just getting used to my calls to action, getting used to giving my calls to action. We're going to keep going, plugging through with Crash Course Philosophy, or I keep saying that. That was my first series I watched of theirs, the Crash Course Philosophy. Yes, we are on Crash Course Statistics. I recommend Crash Course Philosophy. It was fun. Statistics number 11, Science Journalism. So far what she's talking about is basically that it's easy to make bad science and get it published, and it's easy for many journalists to not follow, to do bad journalism.
But these facts are important when considering how trustworthy the conclusion of a study is, and a lot of news articles don't have them. As a side note here, if this study was done in rats instead of humans, the conclusion that ibuprofen increases the risk of fertility issues in men would not be as strongly supported. But let's go to the thought bubble. Imagine that you're going about your morning as usual, sipping your coffee and scrolling through the latest news when you see an article with the title, "Miracle Food Causes Weight Loss." You want to fit better in your jeans, so you click through. You see that the miracle food is called Targ, and the results were statistically significant, so it seems legit. You jump in your car and drive down to the local grocery store and see that Targ is on sale, so you pick up the largest pack and start eating. You're already feeling stronger, but then you begin to experience side effects like heartburn and stomach ulcers, and that weird desire to fight. The article you read didn't mention that when researchers considered the over 20,000 subjects, the weight loss was only about 1/10 of a pound more for Targ eaters. That's not very much, maybe not worth these side effects. When a study reports something is significant, you probably assume that means it's really gonna matter. But this isn't always the case, since significant means something different in statistics than in everyday English. And science journalists can misuse this confusion by not mentioning how big of an effect was observed. Thanks, Thought Bubble. We don't have time to read all the academic articles on even one topic that...
So another way to lie with statistics is to not indicate what was observed. So this is a lie by omission. So how to lie with statistics? Don't cite, one, the side effects, and two, how big of an effect was. Okay, thank you.
affects us. Take what gets called text neck, a condition that includes sore neck muscles from looking down at your phone and laptop all the time. A Google Scholar search for academic articles about text neck returns over 180 results, and that's only since 2013. There's no way that you could read all of those without exacerbating your already sore neck. So we need people like scientific journalists who can distill all those articles into digestible and engaging pieces for us to consume. It's helpful to be skeptical, but we should keep reading about science. When reading a science story, it's important to note a couple things. Who wrote it, who published it, who did the science, and who funded the science. If an article that tells you drinking Diet Coke is good for your teeth is on the Coke website, your suspicion should be raised, more so than if it was published by Scientific American. You should also consider who funded and completed the research the article's based on. If you read an article that claims a rare fruit juice will reduce your blood pressure and stave off cancer, and you see that study was funded by the juice company, be suspicious. Not every study funded by a company is inherently flawed. Science costs money, it can be expensive, and while there are sources of funding from governments and other neutral organizations, the reality is that often the people who are willing to pay to have the research done are the companies who have a vested interest in the results. Sometimes, to get the research done, researchers need to partner with these organizations. Privately funded research can be done well. Another thing to watch for in science and health journalism is whether the claims made in the headline actually match the claims made in the story. You don't see many stories with a headline like, "Ketchup may have mild relationship."
I'm gonna see if I can resync these things. It's pretty annoying.
With weight gain in men over 40.
Thank you for bearing with me. I love you. Oh, my goodness. My goodness. Oh, hey, look, I'm live. Look, Mom, I'm famous. Oh. Perspective philosophy is doing something. That's groovy. Listen, relax, okay? Calm down, okay? We're gonna get to it. I know you're just hankering for more of this high quality content, and if you like this high quality content, then I suggest, encourage, and vote for you going to my Patreon at patreon.com/mindofmeaning.com or patreon.com/mindofmeaning. Don't get it messed up. You know what I meant. And considering support me for less than an expensive latte at Starbucks. Yes, $5 a month gets you all of this sweet, help support the sweet content. And have a Discord as well that I'll probably link for you buddies who want to hang out with me and be my best friend. So give me one moment while I plop this puppy back on the screen. Just like that. Here we are. And hopefully this resolves the syncing issue.
Who's gonna read that? It might be accurate, but it's just not as flashy as is.
It didn't. I don't know why it's not doing it. So, deal. Okay? Just deal.
Ketchup making you fat? There are a number of reasons we get these splashy headlines. Media outlets, from BuzzFeed to Goop to the old guard newspapers, are all fighting for audience these days. All right, maybe not the same audience, but audience. And that competition makes the super sexy headline really, really appealing. Sensational gets clicks. Content creators are under pressure to write and find what's going to get shared. The language of correlation is uncertain, and as such, less catchy. You'll also spot plenty of causation problems in science and health reporting. When you see an article that claims that doing yoga cures cancer, you should check to see whether it was an experimental study or whether the claim is based on correlation on a survey between doing yoga and not having cancer. Only experimental studies with randomized designs and control groups have a shot at showing evidence of causation.
This seems like an important thing to underline. I'm gonna add it to my little notey book. Only experimental is a claim. Only experimental studies of randomized designs and controls control groups have a shot. Hey, stop that. A shot at showing evidence of causation.
because personally, I can think of a lot of confounding factors for that yoga and cancer study. Now, on to another way science can get mischaracterized. There are studies done on mice and rats that get reported as if they were studies on humans. And while a lot of medical and health related studies get their start in mouse models, many of the treatments that work in mice don't end up being successful in their human counterparts. Similarly, you're going to see clickbaity headlines that say things like hydrogen peroxide kills cancer and list all the ways you can now incorporate hydrogen peroxide into your daily life. But what the title doesn't tell you is that these were in vitro studies, which means they're done on real cancer cells, but in a petri dish. In a very simplified sense, the cells were grown by themselves in a dish, and the substance of interest was put into the dish, and it killed the cancer cells. But in a dish, lots of things we consume every day will kill cancer cells, like coffee or alcohol. But they, even working in tandem, aren't gonna cure cancer. Anyway, these misguided hydrogen peroxide kills cancer headlines get shared around online, and people come up with alternative therapies that involve consuming hydrogen peroxide, which can be really, really dangerous, like dead dangerous. Science stories can make for great journalism, and they can give you something clever to say at your next dinner party.
In case you didn't get the message, please don't consume hydrogen peroxide. That's a bad idea. I know you may have been getting a hankering to do that, but please do not do that. Okay? I felt like you needed to be told that. Okay.
But anytime you hear a cable talk show host say the phrase, scientists have found, or a new study suggests, you should always look up that study to be sure, at least before you start spreading it around. And if the results of a study will cause you to make any changes in your life or your family's life, you should really go back and check the science. No matter how reputable the source, it's always important to be aware of these issues, whether you see it in BuzzFeed or The Economist. Articles often gloss over all kinds of details, the kinds of control group that was used, or whether the study was done in mice or monkeys, all of which can make a huge difference in how strongly you can take the claims of the study. And the bigger the life change you're thinking about making, the more in-depth your search for information should be. Adding a square or two of dark chocolate is not going to be a big deal. Trying to cure cancer with high doses of vitamin K, just because some study found it kills cancer cells in a dish, that is. So this doesn't mean all the science you read about on Reddit or watch on your favorite YouTube channel is wrong. It just means that you need to use statistical thinking to check which claims are reasonable and which aren't. In order to help us remember some of the rules of thumb we talked about today, our writer Chelsea came up with a limerick. And so without further ado, Crash Course's first original limerick. When a study reports correlations or has mice as its main population, the results it declares may not be quite fair. So be careful about generalizations. All right, let's see you do better. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Crash Course Statistics is filmed in the Chad and Stacy Immigholt studio in Indianapolis, Indiana, and it's made with the help of all these nice people. Our animation team is Thought Cafe. If you'd like to keep Crash Course in the Chad and result reports correlate do Crash Course's first original limerick. When a study reports correlations or has mice as its main population, the results it declares may not be quite fair. So be careful about generalizations. All right, let's see you do better. Thanks for watching.
Sorry,
I'll see you next time.
I stopped counting.
Crash Course Statistics is filmed in the Chad and Stacy. Hi, I'm Adrienne Hill, and welcome back to Crash Course Statistics. Today we're going to take a step back from sampling and regressions to talk about the impact of all.
Okay. It's time to do something else. Let's see, what do I want to do? If you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you for joining me today on this adventure into learning statistics, fun, happy times. I'm gonna watch this lady because I've been trying to. Maybe not. I watched a video on Aldous Alda, or a video with Aldous Alda on like Big Think earlier today. I'm trying to organize my thoughts better. And he was recommending some advice on how to communicate. He basically offered a rule of 3. The first of the 3 was to think in terms of threes. So I'm trying to employ that more. I'm trying to use that more. So 1, I want to use more concise thinking. 2, I want to become a better communicator. And 3, I'm going to do that. See, it's kind of tricky. I mean, I have a little bit of practice with it in terms of like premises and conclusions, like thinking in terms of premises leading to a conclusion. But I'm not terribly good at that either, if I'm being really honest. So what am I doing right now? I'm trying to find a good statistical video for us to watch. And if I'm being honest, I'm getting a little bored. And if I were lying, I would say I'm not bored at all. So, what are we doing? We're trying to find a good statistics video. Now I have some playlists. So here we have one from MIT from 2016, and I want to just see whether or not it goes in order.
Which is most effective?
It doesn't. It's so annoying. Like, how am I supposed to take this stupid class?
The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will help MIT OpenCourseWare continue to offer high-quality educational resources for free.
Is it me, or does 2017 still not seem like that long ago? View complete course. Let's see if it still exists. It does still exist. Oh boy. All right, I'm gonna turn you all back on. So look at this. Look at this wealth of information. We can check out the syllabus. So we've got probability and random variables is what they're saying we should start with, but we're gonna cheat and watch the videos. Let's see. Okay, so we've got prerequisites. Let's check this out though. How does this look? Does this have videos? No, it doesn't. We can't even take this class. And we've got some assignments. We got some lecture notes. We could go over this. Might be worth it. Get our MIT education on. Super exciting stuff, I know. But hey, you know, I'm just starting out, okay? I'm just starting out this channel. I mean, obviously not, because I've got some older videos on here that are largely garbage. But you know, I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying so hard, and you know, it's a challenge, right? And I don't care. I'm gonna do some boring content. I'm gonna do some boring content because I want to grow, and who's going to stop me at this point? I am not beholden to any audience, okay? I am not trapped by their close-minded thinking. So I'm going to watch some boring content. And if I go to sleep, well, damn it, that's my right. Okay? So we're going to learn statistics, and I'm going to become a genius. And anyone who finds this content and enjoys this content should go to patreon.com/mindofmeaning and subscribe, because I deserve your hard-earned money. And, that's just the sense of entitlement that me as a creator gets to have, okay? And until you're on screen doing this boring content, you don't get to say anything about it. Or if you do, then I have the right to ignore it, so nah. Anyway, let's get back into the boring content and watch it. Starting with lecture video number 1, Introduction to Statistics. Wow, there's 2 of them. Oof. Okay, so we are going to learn to crush it. Let's check out these assignments first, though. We got problem sets. Wow, problem sets. Whenever I see this notation, it's always very intimidating. It's like, do I really understand any of this? It's very humbling. Stay in school, kids. This may be a bit challenging, but the good thing about not being in school is I'm not paying any money for this. So, let's just buckle in, and if we have any trouble whatsoever, we can just do a deep dive, get a little better. The goal is to become the best statistician that has ever lived. Okay, that's our goal, and we're well on our way. We are gonna be the very best, like Ash Ketchum. Okay, we're gonna do it. So let's start. Ooh, there's even a transcript. Boop.
The following content is provided under a Creative Commons license. Your support will to make a donation to OpenCourseWare at ocw.mit.edu.
Bum bum bum.
Okay, so the course you're currently sitting in is 18650, and it's called Fundamentals of Statistics. And until last spring, it was still called Statistics for Applications, and it turned out that really based on the content, Fundamentals of Statistics was a more appropriate title. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to be covering in class, what this class is about, what it's not about. There's several, I realize there's several offerings in statistics on campus. So I want to make sure that you've chosen the right one. I also understand that for some of you, it's a matter of scheduling. I need to actually throw out a disclaimer. I tend to speak too fast. I'm aware of that. Someone in the back, just do it like that when you have no idea what I'm saying. Hopefully, I will repeat myself many times. So if you average over time, you will see that statistics will tell you that you will get the right message that I was actually trying to send. All right, so what are the goals of this class? So the first one is basically to give you an introduction. No one here is expected to have seen statistics before, but as you will see, you're expected to have seen probability, and usually you do see some statistics in a probability course, so I'm sure some of you have some ideas, but I won't expect anything. And we'll be using mathematics, right? It's a math class, so there's going to be a bunch of equations, not so much real data and statistical thinking. We're going to try to provide theoretical guarantees. So if I have 2 estimators that are available for me, how theory guides me to choose between the best of them, how certain can I be of my guarantees or prediction. It's one thing to just spit out a number. It's another thing to put some error bars around them. So we'll see how to build error bars, for example. You will have your own applications. I'm happy to answer questions about specific applications, but rather than trying to tailor applications to an entire institute, I think we're going to work with pretty standard applications, mostly, not very serious ones, and hopefully you'll be able to take the main principles back with you and apply them to a particular problem. So what I'm hoping that you will get out of this class is that when you have a real life situation, and by real life, I mean mostly at MIT, so some people probably would not call that real life, the goal is to formulate a statistical problem in mathematical terms. If I want to say, is a drug effective that's not in mathematical terms? I have to find out which measure I want to have to call it effective. I want to, maybe it's over a certain period of time, maybe it's over, so there's a lot of things that you actually need, and I'm not really going to tell you how to.
This is probably going to be way over my head, but like I said at the beginning, we're going to watch this and try to supplement it while we go along. We'll probably try to watch some videos on probability theory. If we run into things we don't know, we're going to try to formulate some questions about it. So, like, a little more background. You know, I told my sad story earlier, and I realize I lean heavily into irony, and that's true. I think there's something to be said about like leaning in and out of irony, but I'm an, you know, generally an earnest person. I just think irony is funny, and sometimes I lose my train of thought, and I can understand how that wouldn't be engaging content. So we're gonna bring it on back. We're bringing it back to the task at hand. We're watching this video on statistics. 1, 2. If we don't have the appropriate background knowledge to understand this, then we are going to look it up. And 3, while we're looking it up, we will be expanding our foundational knowledge, our knowledge, such that we can handle these problems and other problems that might come our way that demand those kinds of background from us. So, see there, that's me practicing my thinking in threes. It was kind of clumsy, but we'll get better. We will get better, faster, stronger, and more continuous.
You go from the application to the point you need to be, but I will certainly describe to you what point you need to be at if you want to start applying statistical methodology. Then once you understand what kind of question you want to answer, do I want a yes/no answer? Do I want a number? Do I want error bars? Do I want to make predictions 5 years in the future? Do I have site information or do I not have site information? All these things, based on that, hopefully you will have a catalog of statistical methods that you're going to be able to use and you know, apply in the wild. And also, you know, no statistical method is perfect. Some of them people have agreed upon over the years, and people understand that this is the standard. But I want you to be able to understand what the limitations are, and when you make conclusions based on data, that those conclusions might be erroneous, for example. All right. More practically, my goal here is to have you ready. So, who has taken, for example, a machine learning class here? All right. So many of you actually, maybe a third. I've taken a machine learning class. The goal here will be to take you, so statistics has somewhat evolved into machine learning in recent years, and my goal is to take you there. So machine learning has a strong algorithmic component, so maybe some of you have taken a machine learning class that displays mostly the algorithmic component, but there's also a statistical component, right? The machine learns from data, and hopefully...
Okay, I'm gonna leave this running. I'm gonna go make some more coffee. Enjoy.
So this statistical track, and there's some statistical learning, which are statistical machine learning classes that you can take here. So they're offered at the graduate level, I believe. But once you take those classes, I want you to be ready to be able to take those classes, having the statistical fundamentals to understand what you're doing, and then you're going to be able to, you know, expand to broader and more sophisticated methods. So lectures are here from 11 to 12:30 on Tuesday and Thursday. Victor Emmanuel will also be, and you can call him Victor, will also be holding mandatory recitation. So please go on Stellar and pick your recitation. It's either 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 on Wednesdays, and it's going to be mostly focused on problem solving. They're mandatory in the sense that, well, we're allowed to do this, but they're not going to cover entirely new material, but they might cover some, you know, techniques that might save you some time when it comes to the exam. So, you know, you might get by, so, you know, attendance is not going to be taken or anything like this, but I highly recommend that you go because, well, they're mandatory, so you cannot really complain that something was taught only in recitation. So please register on Stellar for which of the 2 recitations you would like to be in. They're capped at 40, so first come, first serve. So homework will be due weekly. There's a total of 11 problem sets. I realize this is a lot. Hopefully we'll keep them light. I just want you to, you know, not rust too much. The 10 best will be kept, and this will count for a total of 30% of the final grade. They're due Mondays at 8 p.m. On Stellar, and so this is a new thing. We're not going to use the boxes outside of the math department. We're going to use only PDF files. So well, you're always welcome to type them and practice your LaTeX or Word typing. I also understand that this can be a bit of a strain, so just write them down on a piece of paper, use your iPhone, and take a picture of it. Dropbox has a nice new, so try to find something that puts a lot of contrast, especially if you use pencil, because we're going to check if they're readable, and this is your responsibility to have a readable file. In particular, so I've had over the years, okay, not at MIT, I must admit, but I've had students who actually write a doc file and think that converting it to a PDF consists in erasing the extension DOC and replacing it by PDF. This is not how it works. So I'm sure you will figure it out. Please try to keep them letter size. This is not a strict requirement, but I don't want to see thumbnails either. You are allowed to have 2 late homeworks, and by late I mean 24 hours late. Okay? No questions asked. You submit them. This will be counted. You don't have to send an email to warn us or anything like this. Beyond that, it's going to be, given that you have 1 Slack for 1 0 grade and Slack for 2 late homeworks, you're going to have to come up with very good explanation why you need actually more extensions than that if you ever do. In particular, you're going to have to keep track about why you've used your 3 options before. There's going to be 2 midterms. One is October 3rd and one is November 7th. They're both going to be in class for the duration of the lecture. When I say they last for 1 hour and 20 minutes, it does not mean that if you arrive 10 minutes before the end of lecture, you still get 1 hour and 20 minutes. It will end at the end of lecture time. For this as well, no pressure. Only the best of the 2 will be kept, and this grade will count for 30% of the grade. This will be closed books and closed notes. So the purpose is for you to, yes? How many midterms did you have? 2? I said the best of the 2 will be kept, yes? The best of the 2, not the best 2? Right. We will add them, multiply the number by 9, and that will be your grade. No. So I am trying to be nice. There's just a limit to what I can do. All right, so this will be, the goal is for you to learn things and to be familiar with them. In the final, you will be allowed to have your notes with you, but I want you, the midterms are also a way for you to develop some mechanisms so that you don't actually waste too much time on things that you should be able to do without thinking too much. You will be allowed a cheat sheet because, well, you can always forget something. And you will, there will be 2-sided letter sheet, and you can practice yourself as writing as small as you want, and you can put whatever you want on this cheat sheet. All right, the final will be decided by the registrar. It's going to be 3 hours, and it's going to count for 40%. You cannot bring books, but you can bring your notes. Yes? They're not? Oh yeah, there's a 1 that's missing on both of them, isn't there? Let's figure that out. The syllabus is the true one. The slides are so that we can discuss, but the ones that's on the syllabus is the one that counts. And I think they're also posted on the calendar on Stellar as well. Any other question? Okay, so the prereqs here, and who has looked at the first problem set already? Okay, so those hands that are raised realize that there is a true prerequisite of probability for this class. It can be at the level of 18600 or 6041. I should say B. Now it's 2 classes. I will require you to know some calculus and have some notions of linear algebra, such as what is a matrix, what is a vector, how do you multiply those things together, some notion of what orthogonal vectors are, and I'll remind you about. So we'll talk about eigenvectors and eigenvalues, but I'll remind you all of that.
If I'm honest, a lot of that is beyond me. I never really got past college algebra in college. So my mathematical abilities are pretty low, but that's fine because I'm here to do the work, to get better, be a better user of tools for knowing. So we might do some math. We might do some really hard math. We might need to develop that capacity for us. And I've actually got a setup here where we can maybe go over some problems, take some written notes. I need a whiteboard. I mean, I have a whiteboard. I need to maybe get my whiteboard from upstairs, my tiny one, so that we can do some writing on it. But yeah, this is probably going to be a very challenging course for me. But maybe we can go back and take it nice and slow, nice and easy.
So this is not a strict prereq, but if you've taken it, for example, it doesn't hurt to go back to your notes when we get closer to this chapter on principal component analysis. The chapters, as they're listed in the syllabus, are in order, so you will see when it actually comes. So there's no required textbook, and I know this is a bit of I mean, I know you tend to not like that. You like to have your textbook to know where you're going and what we're doing. I'm sorry, it's just this class. Either I would have to go to a mathematical statistics textbook, which is just too much, or to go to a more, engineering type statistics class, which is just too little. So hopefully the problem set will be enough for you to practice. The recitations will have some problems to solve as well. And the material will be posted on the slides. So you should have everything you need. There's plenty of resources online if you want to expand on a particular topic or read it said by somebody else. The book that I recommend in the syllabus is this book called All of Statistics by Wasserman, mainly because of the title. I'm guessing it has all of it in it. It's pretty broad. There's actually not that many. It's more of an intro grad level, but it's not very deep, but you see a lot of the overview. Certainly what we're going to cover will be a subset of what's in there. So the slides will be posted on Stellar before lectures, before we start a new chapter, and after we're done with the chapter with the annotations, and also with typos corrected, like for the exam. So there will be some video lectures. Again, the first one will be posted on OCW from last year, but all of them will be available on Stellar.
Come on, let's get into it.
You can also play it at speed 0.75 in case I. All right, so why should you study statistics? Well,
Tell me.
if you read the news, you will see a lot of statistics. I mentioned machine learning, it's built on a lot of statistics. Statistics is now, if I were to teach this class 10 years ago, I would have to explain to you that, data collection and making decisions based on data was something that made sense, but now it's almost, in our life. We're used to this idea that data helps making decisions, right? And so people use data to conduct studies. So here I found a bunch of press titles that I think the keyword I was looking for was study finds if I want to do this. So this I actually did not bother doing it again this year. This is all 2016, 2016, 2016. But the keyword that I look for is usually study find. So a new study find, traffic is bad for your health. So we had to wait 2016 for data to tell us that. And there's a bunch of other slightly more interesting ones. For example, one that you might find interesting is that the study finds that students benefit from waiting to declare a major. Now, there's a bunch of press titles, one that studies, one in the MIT News that finds brain connections key to reading. And so here we sort of have an idea of what happened there, right? Some data was collected, some scientific hypothesis was formulated, and then the data was here to try to, prove or disprove the scientific hypothesis, right? That's the usual scientific process. And we need to understand how the scientific process comes, because some of those things might be actually questionable. Who is 100% sure that study finds that students, you think that you benefit from waiting to declare a major, right? Maybe some of you, I would be skeptical about this, right? I would be like, I don't want to wait to declare a major. Maybe this study, so what kind of thing can we bring? Well, maybe this study studied people that were different from me. Or maybe the study find that that this is beneficial for a majority of people. I'm not a majority, I'm just one person. There's a bunch of things that we need to understand what those things actually mean. And we'll see that those are actually not statements about individuals. They're not even statements about the cohort of people they've actually looked at. They're statements about a parameter of a distribution that was used to model the benefit of waiting. Right? So there's a lot of questions and there are a lot of layers that come into this, and we're going to want to understand what was going on in there and try to peel it off and understand what assumptions have been put in there. Even though it looks like a totally legit study,
This is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm into it. I'm super into it. I want to understand the assumptions, the things that we assume, the deeper layers. This is oh man, this is pretty exciting.
Out of those studies, statistically, I think there's going to be one that's going to be wrong. Well, maybe not one.
Gonna go check on my coffee.
There might be, if I put a long list of those, there would be a few that would actually be wrong, okay? If I put 20, there would definitely be one that's wrong. So you have to see that every time you see 20 studies, one is probably wrong. When there's studies about drug effects, it would be out of the list of 100, one would be wrong. So we'll see what that means and what I mean by that, okay? So of course, not only studies that make this discoveries are actually making the press title, there's also the press that talks about things that make no sense. So I love this first experiment, the dead salmon experiment. So actually it was a graduate student came to a neuroscience poster session, pulled out this poster and explained the scientific experiment that he was conducting, which consisted in taking a previously frozen and thawed salmon, putting it in an MRI, showing it pictures of violent images and recording its brain activity. And he was able to discover a few voxels that were activated by those violent images. And can somebody tell me what happened here? Was the salmon responding to the violent activity? So basically, this is just a statistical fluke, right? It's just randomness at play. There's so many voxels that are recorded, and there's so many fluctuations, right? There's always a little bit of noise when you run those things, that some of them, just by chance, got lit up. And so we need to understand how to correct for that. In this particular instance, we need to have tools that tell us that, well, finding 3 voxels that are activated for that many voxels that you can find in the salmon's brain is just a too small of a number. Maybe we need to find a clump of 20 of them, for example. All right, so we're going to have mathematical tools that help us find those particular numbers. I don't know if you saw this one by John Oliver about hacking, or actually it said p-hacking. And so basically, what John Oliver is saying is actually a full length, like these long segments on this, and he was explaining how there's a huge, there's a sociology question here about how there's a huge incentive for scientists to publish results, right? You're not going to say, you know what, this year I found nothing. And so people are trying to find things, and just by searching, it's as if they were searching for all the voxels in a brain until they find one that was just lit up by chance. And so they just run all these studies, and at some point, one will be right just out of chance. And so we have to be very careful about doing this. There's much more complicated problems associated to what's called p-hacking, which consists in violating the basic assumptions, in particular looking at the data, and then formulating your scientific assumption based on data, and then going back to it. It doesn't work, let's just formulate another one. And if you start doing this, all bets are off. Okay, so actually, the statistics, the theory that we're going to develop is actually for very clean use of data, which might be a little unpleasant if you spent, if you've had an army of graduate students collecting genomic data for a year, for example. Maybe you don't want to say, well, I had one hypothesis, didn't work, let's throw all the data to the trash. And so we need to find ways to be able to do this. And there's actually a course being taught at BU. It's still in its early stages, but something called adaptive data analysis that will allow you to do these kind of things. Questions?
Okay, that's an important little piece, because so adaptive data analysis. So my understanding of what he just said is adaptive data analysis is like basically ethical p-hacking. That's my understanding. So rather than hacking for a particular thing that you're looking for after you've collected the data and solution, we've looked into p-hacking. If you ask me to summarize it, could I do it well at this point? No. You know what? This is probably an opportune time. Hold on. Here's what we're gonna do. Because what I want to be able to do is really understand p-hacking. So my understanding of p-hacking is you collect a bunch of data and you search through the data and you basically try and find results, interesting results from the data you've collected. Then you write, it's basically backward rationalization. From the data you've collected, you draw conclusions from the data. And the issue, I think, with it is that basically you may be coming to random conclusions that just from the very fact of collecting data, random data, you are going to find correlations that seem to say something, but it's really just a random effect. That's sort of my loose understanding. But I don't know that that's really an in-depth understanding. Like, what would the difference be then between p-hacking and adaptive, what did he call it? Adaptive data analysis? So maybe we can look that up. P-hacking versus adaptive data analysis. Ooh. Hold on. There might be someone's YouTube channel we're subscribing to. We have a channel called Data Demystified. They have 16,000 subscribers. When was the last thing that they produced? Hold on. You can watch. Look at this. 8 months ago, Professor Gaelic Interesting. Looks like he was doing data stuff, then he was getting into business stuff. Could be good stuff. Seems like it's been 8 months since he... You know what, Will? Subscribed. Let's see what he has to say about p-hacking.
Want to be a successful academic researcher while taking it easy? Want to succeed without actually contributing to science in any meaningful way? Want to become an academic celebrity on the heels of questionable research practices? Well, you're in luck, because today we're going to learn how to become famous by p-hacking. On a more serious note, in 2011, Joe Simmons, Leif Nelson, and Yuri Simonson published an academic paper titled False Positive Psychology. Undisclosed flexibility in data collection and analysis allows presenting anything as significant. In this paper, they first demonstrated just how dangerous what is now well known as p-hacking can be. In short, they showed that what were once conventional research practices could result in incredibly high levels of what we call type 1 error or false positive results. These are results that allow researchers to publish papers with results that actually have little basis in reality. Welcome to Data Demystified. I'm Jeff Gallick, and this is my series of videos on p-hacking. In part 1 of this series, we're going to dig into just how p-hacking works and why, when abused, it can undermine our confidence in science. In the next 4 parts, we'll dig into specific techniques that unethical researchers might use to actually p-hack their data, with the goal of developing an intuition for just why those techniques are so bad. And in the final video in this series, I'll explain a brilliant tool that these same researchers devised called a p-curve that helps detect these types of bad practices. As a quick aside, I'm personally very connected to this story, as Joe Simmons is a collaborator of mine, Leif Nelson was my academic advisor long ago in grad school, and Yuri Simonson is a good friend. So aside from knowing this work well, I value the contributions of these researchers on a very personal level. Now, before we get into the specific ways in which p-hacking occurs, we need a quick primer on what p-hacking is and why it's so problematic. In short, many academic disciplines have decided, mostly arbitrarily, that if a result they report has something called a p-value that is below 0.05, that is considered scientifically credible. Anything with a p-value above 0.05 is considered not as having enough evidence to meet standard levels of scientific confidence. I won't go too deeply into what statistical significance is, but I do have a different video covering that, which I'll link to below if you want to learn more. Anyway, this cutoff acts as a very strong incentive for researchers. If your research finding has a p-value below 0.05, you can probably publish the result in an academic journal. And this is critical for academic success. For researchers, success is defined by research publications, and without them, you just don't get promoted and you could easily lose your job. So researchers really want to get results that have p-values below 0.05. The problem then is bad incentives. Researchers should be incentivized to find true findings that advance knowledge, but they are actually incentivized to publish papers. So if you are a researcher who just spent years of your life working on a research project, only to find that a key result comes back with a p-value of, say, 0.07, in this weird world of cutoffs and incentives, you're screwed. You can publish your results, but if you engage in what have become known as questionable research practices, you can try to come up with ways to massage your data to get you below that all-important cutoff of 0.05, allowing you to reap the glory that comes with publishing academic papers.
Hold on. I can't deal with it. We're gonna try and fix the lag issue here. It's just really annoying. I'm just restarting my other computer. So p-hacking is massaging the data. So if I'm thinking about this, we're spending this time to learn about statistics. I've got a couple goals. So part of this channel, like I've said, like I've said, part of the goal of this channel is I get better at public speaking. Part of the goal of the channel is to improve my understanding of statistics. A lot of it is very overwhelming, if I'm being honest, but I feel I also feel pretty good in my ability to just power through and start to get things, especially if I apply myself over time. We'll probably get there. So I'm developing my statistical knowledge, I'm developing my public speaking ability, and hopefully along the way, the quality of my content keeps getting better and better, and listeners, you, my dear listeners, will find it engaging, quality, and find it in your heart to provide me with the resources to continue to make this content potentially even full time. But right now, we're just at the beginning of our journey. The beginning. The crux. And like I say, I like to mix it up. I have a lot of irony that I use to be really funny. I am really, really funny. I am so funny. And I like to share that. It's my gift to you. But I'm also a sincere person, and I am really trying to do this. And I've been, like I've said, I've ended up here on a search for basically truth, you know? I'm searching for what's real. So I'm happy if you've chosen to join me. I don't even know. Oh, wow. My computer isn't charging. That may be why it's lagging. Come on. Give me a second. Okay, well, we'll see how things end up. Okay, so we were watching a video on p hacking. We'll probably finish that up, and then we'll go back to the statistics of application, or application of statistics. Let's go ahead and keep working on our video here. Oh, love that. Bro, chill. Come on. Hmm. hate this. Okay, let me try this. You try to fix something, you screw like 50,000 things up. We might need to take a little break. Ay, caramba. This is no bueno. Here I was thinking I'd solved the problem. Let's try it again. Okay, maybe it's working. No. All right, I might need to call it here. I think my setup's reaching its limits. We've hit about the 2-hour mark. Tracks. Seems like around this time all my stuff starts to mess up. So I'm gonna put it on a brief hold. We're gonna pause while I figure out some technical difficulties. If you've enjoyed any of this content, any of it at all, please consider supporting me at patreon.com/mindofmeaning. And that's for less of a cost, of less than the cost of a latte a month. You can support great content, fantastic content that helps you become a better person. And yes, I've determined that. And yes, I am the arbiter of your life. And so, please consider it. I would be very grateful. And other than that, I'm gonna just sign off for the moment, and we will maybe be back in a few minutes if I can figure out my setup here, and if not, well, I'll probably just cry. Okay. Thank you for joining me, and have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.